Have you ever stopped to think that maybe you're not doing anything wrong, and yet you're heading towards a fragile financial future? This question often causes discomfort because most people associate financial problems with serious mistakes, irresponsibility, or lack of control. But what if the real risk lies not in wrong decisions, but in the decisions themselves, socially accepted, praised, encouraged, and repeated by almost everyone? Maybe you work, pay your bills, avoid extreme debt, and try to do the right thing. Maybe you followed the standard script: stability, possible comfort, small rewards to ease the fatigue. None of that seems dangerous. On the contrary, it seems responsible. And that's exactly where the invisible trap lies. You haven't done anything wrong, but that doesn't mean you're building real security. Have you ever been through this? The problem is that many normal decisions silently impoverish ordinary people. They don't break anyone all at once. They don't cause immediate crises. They simply reduce options, decrease margins, and create a strange feeling of stagnation. Life goes on, time passes, and the money never seems to budge. What you're about to discover may surprise you, because this isn't a matter of income, luck, or intelligence. It's financial behavior repeated over years. There's a dangerous psychological pattern behind these choices. The human brain excels at protecting the present and is terrible at defending the future. That's why decisions that bring relief today often seem harmless. The price doesn't appear now. It doesn't come with a siren, notification, or clear warning. It arrives later, disguised as tiredness, anxiety, a feeling of being behind, and a lack of options. It arrives with emotional, mental, and financial interest. Many people only realize this when they reach a certain age and realize that, despite having done everything right, they are trapped by commitments, spending patterns, and choices that limit any real change. It's not about excessive luxury or obvious mistakes. It's about small, normal decisions that accumulate. Stay with me until the end, because understanding this mechanism completely changes how you see money, time, and choices. Perhaps you've already felt that uncomfortable sensation of always rushing, always trying to compensate, always thinking that a little more will solve everything. More income, more effort, more sacrifice. But what if the problem isn't a lack of effort, but rather the type of decision that seems too safe to question? Before we delve into concrete examples, it's important to keep in mind a simple yet powerful idea. The future doesn't punish obvious mistakes. It punishes repeated habits. And some of the most socially accepted choices are precisely those that most hinder your financial life without anyone realizing it. Now, let's open this box calmly. And perhaps that's exactly why this conversation needs to go beyond a single video. Because when we talk about normal decisions that impoverish ordinary people, we're talking about real stories, about feelings that many people carry in silence. If any part of what I've said so far resonated with you, if it touched you in some way, leave it in the comments. Tell me what touched you the most, what you've noticed in your own relationship with money, or even what you've always felt but never been able to put into words. Sometimes, writing is the first step towards seeing things more clearly. If this content resonates with you, liking this video is a simple way to show that this type of conversation matters. It may seem small, but it greatly helps to spread this message to more people who are still on autopilot, repeating choices without realizing the impact later on. Your participation here is what makes this channel grow and continue to bring reflections that almost no one dares to make. Subscribing to the channel is also a way to walk this path together. This space exists for those who want to better understand financial behavior without magical promises, without unrealistic shortcuts, just awareness, clarity, and time working in your favor. Because what we're going to explore from here on out isn't comfortable, but it's liberating. And that's exactly what comes next. When we talk about this type of behavior, it's common for someone to think, but that's being responsible. And that's precisely where the conversation gets delicate. Because at first glance, everything seems right. Prioritizing comfort early on, avoiding any temporary financial hardship, seeking stability above all else. None of that sounds like a mistake. On the contrary, it's what every functional adult is encouraged to do. The problem is that this pattern doesn't break anyone. It just keeps everything exactly where it is. And, over time, This takes a silent toll. The behavior that holds you back your entire life isn't exaggeration. It's excessive caution without strategy. It's organizing your life to avoid discomfort now, even if it means sacrificing space in the future. Many people build an entire financial routine to avoid tension. Installments that fit on the limit, expenses that relieve stress, choices that bring an immediate sense of security. This doesn't create a crisis, it creates stagnation. And stagnation is difficult to perceive because it disguises itself as normality. Everyone does it. And that's precisely why almost no one questions it. Working harder to maintain the current standard of living, using income increases to improve comfort, adjusting life to avoid overstraining. All of this seems prudent. But behind this logic lies a hidden truth. When you completely eliminate temporary discomfort, you also eliminate the possibility of real progress. Without space, there is no transformation. Without room for maneuver, there is no choice. The problem isn't spending too much. The problem is spending everything. It's organizing decisions in such a way that zero financial energy is left to invest, test, make small mistakes, or change course. Life goes on, responsibilities increase, and that feeling of "I'll deal with it later" becomes the norm. Little by little, the journey becomes burdensome, not for lack of effort, but because every decision was made to sustain the present, never to liberate the future. There is a profound psychological impact to this. The person begins to feel like they are always busy, always tired, always chasing after something. And when they look back, they realize that time passed faster than they imagined. There wasn't a clear mistake to correct. There was only a sequence of decisions that were too normal to question. And this generates frustration, silent guilt, and the feeling that something didn't add up. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because behind this behavior lies a mindset that is built up gradually, almost invisibly, shaping decisions, priorities, and even how you view money and success. Understanding this inner workings completely changes how you interpret your own path and opens up space for revelations that many people only have too late. If this made sense to you, comment below. This makes sense to me. And you know what makes all this even more dangerous? It's that most of the time, it doesn't seem dangerous, because time has a strange way of working against us. It doesn't warn us. It doesn't make noise. It doesn't send notifications. It just passes. And while it passes, our brain does what it's always been programmed to do: protect the present. The present is concrete. The future is abstract. The present has bills, tiredness, pressure, a desire for relief. The future is a distant image that we believe we'll be able to solve when we get there. This is the psychology of delay. It's not a lack of intelligence. It's biology. It's human behavior. The mind tends to overvalue immediate rewards and underestimate consequences that are far off. That's why small decisions, which seem harmless today, gain strength over time. You don't feel the impact of an isolated choice. You feel the impact of a repeated, accumulated, normalized choice. And the accumulation is invisible at first. Therein lies the hidden truth. The problem isn't in what you do once. It's in the pattern you come to call normal life. Think about it. When you postpone a small decision, saving a little, cutting expenses, creating a financial cushion, organizing the basics, you don't lose anything immediately. In fact, you gain comfort. You gain relief. You feel you deserve it, that it's not the right time, that now is not the time. But time silently records everything, and financial life works like a journey of layers. Each choice today becomes the foundation of tomorrow. If your foundation is tight, tomorrow already starts limited. And when you do this for years, the limitation ceases to be a phase and becomes a structure. What's most deceiving is that the feeling of the present always seems urgent. Daily life screams. The future whispers. So you keep putting off important things with the most convincing justification of all. I'll deal with it later. But later is a place that doesn't exist. It never arrives the way we imagine it. Because when it does, it becomes the present. And the present keeps screaming. That's why so many people approach 40 not necessarily without money, but without options. And that's much heavier, because when you have options, you breathe, you can change, you can say no, you can start over. But when you have no room for maneuver, any problem becomes despair, any change becomes a risk. Any opportunity becomes impossible. And life becomes like that. You working to sustain a structure that was built little by little without realizing it. Time doesn't destroy things with a single blow. It wears them down through repetition. Now, I want to delve even deeper into this subject because there's a specific point where this cumulative effect ceases to be invisible and begins to appear in the form of anxiety, frustration, and a feeling of being behind, as if you're always running but never arriving. And when you understand exactly where this turning point occurs, many revelations begin to make sense within your own story. Comment below. I'm on this journey too. There comes a point when everything that seemed distant begins to materialize in an uncomfortable way, not as a sudden shock, but as a constant weight. Income may even be similar to what it was a few years ago, sometimes even higher, but the feeling is that it has shrunk. Responsibilities have increased, energy has decreased, and the margin for correcting past choices has practically disappeared. It is at this point that many people realize that something hasn't settled, even without knowing exactly where it began. This is the moment when the bill comes due, not as punishment, not as injustice, but as the mathematical consequence of decisions repeated over time. Nothing fell from the sky. Nothing went wrong all at once. It was the silent accumulation of choices too normal to be questioned. Installments that became the norm, comfort that became a necessity, stability that became a prison. Time did what it always does. It added everything up and presented the result. The hardest part is that when that moment arrives, the context is different. The same person who previously had flexibility now has commitments. The same routine that once seemed simple now demands much more effort. And what could be adjusted with small movements now requires large, tiring, and emotionally burdensome changes. It's not a lack of intelligence, it's a lack of space. And without space, any decision becomes a risk. That's when the phrase charging with interest stops being a metaphor and becomes reality. Interest on anxiety, frustration, and mental exhaustion. Interest on missed opportunities, unchosen paths, and alternatives that were never built. Financial life begins to function like a locked system, where everything that comes in already has a defined destination. There's no time left, no money left, no clarity left. All that remains is the feeling of constantly putting out fires. And the hardest thing to accept is that this doesn't happen because someone was irresponsible. It happens because someone was too normal. They went with the flow, repeated what seemed safe, postponed minor discomforts believing that the future would be easier to handle. But the future never comes easier. It comes more demanding. And when you get there unprepared, the pressure is high. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because there's a specific point where this burden ceases to be merely financial and begins to affect identity, choices, and even how a person views their own journey. Understanding this behind-the-scenes aspect changes how you interpret the past, and, most importantly, how you begin to reposition your decisions going forward. Comment below. This makes sense to me. There's a silent moment when something changes inside. It's not a dramatic turning point, nor a heroic decision. It's perception. It's when you see the pattern clearly and understand that the problem was never an isolated mistake, but the sum of decisions that were too normal to be questioned. That's the turning point. And it happens before any practical action, because all real transformation begins with how you interpret your own story. When this realization arrives early, something important is reorganized. Instant wealth doesn't appear, nor do magical shortcuts. What emerges is control. Time regains its value. Choices cease to be reactive and become conscious. The mindset shifts from enduring the present to building options. It's a subtle but profound change because it redefines what security means. Security stops being about avoiding discomfort and becomes about creating a margin. Those who recognize this pattern before the age of 40 don't become completely different overnight. They continue working, paying bills, and handling responsibilities. The difference is that you start to see behind-the-scenes aspects that previously went unnoticed. Small decisions gain strategic weight. The impact of time ceases to be an invisible enemy and becomes a possible ally. And this completely alters the journey because it restores the feeling of choice. This realization also alleviates guilt. When you understand the hidden truth behind the financial setback, you stop attacking yourself and start observing yourself. It's not about being ashamed of the past. It's about correctly interpreting what happened. And this interpretation opens up space for better decisions, not out of pressure, but out of clarity. Financial life ceases to be a game of survival and becomes a process of building. The most powerful aspect of this turning point is that it changes the rhythm. Anxiety decreases because there is direction. Frustration loses its power because there is understanding. You don't need to solve everything now. You need to decide differently from now on. And deciding differently requires awareness before action. That's what separates those who repeat cycles from those who begin to transform them. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because when perception matures, new criteria emerge for choosing, rejecting, and prioritizing. It is at this level that the mindset ceases to be generic and begins to align with real life, with concrete limits, desires, and possibilities. From there, the path becomes clearer, not easy, but honest, and the revelations that emerge help to rebuild decisions with more intention and less fear. Comment below. I'm on this journey too. If you've made it this far, it's because something in this conversation has stayed with you until the end. And when that happens, it's usually not out of idle curiosity. It's because the topic touched on something real. So, if this content helped you see decisions differently, brought clarity, or even that silent discomfort that makes you think, subscribing to the channel is just a simple way to continue this journey with me. The idea here is exactly that: to talk about money with more awareness, less noise, and more truth. If this makes sense to you, leave a comment saying so. This message was for me. This shows me who stayed until the end and helps keep this space alive with people who truly want to understand and evolve. And if you felt a connection with what was said, a like is a small gesture, but it greatly strengthens this type of content and helps it reach those who still need to hear it. There's a video over here that complements this topic and delves even deeper into this reflection. Click there and continue reading.